Tom, welcome to Business Uncomplicated. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here, Rich. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So we have a long history together, and it's funny how many lives you live. And who would have thought, what 8 years ago when we met, or 6 years ago, that we'd be in the positions we're in today. So I always find it interesting how lives take twists and turns in your career.
The friendships persist, though. So I'm glad
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
together in one way.
Yeah. Exactly, right? It shows the boundaries beyond the workplace. So before we get into it, because I'm really excited to learn more about your new venture, but for those listening, who is Tom Gersic? Maybe give a little bit of background about who you are and the types of things that ultimately led you to found the company.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for the opportunity, Rich. And I'm excited to talk about UX. So UX, I'll just give a brief overview of what I'm doing right now, and then I'll give a little bit of
Yeah.
history. So UX.AI, we're a software startup. The overall idea is to help sales reps, sales leaders, sales organizations deal with incoming leads. A lot of enterprise companies have more leads than they know what to do with. And once you have them, really, if you're not following up in 24 hours, if you're not engaging, if you're not repeatedly engaging with those leads, you're letting them die on the vine. So that's the idea, is to have a software product that does all of that without having to stitch together a bunch of different tools to be able to research leads, to capture, to research, to score, um, route them to the right rep, and then also send the emails and contact people. So I'm really excited about it, and I'm happy to talk even more about it later on in the podcast. I started my career as an engineer. I was working as a programmer, web programmer back in 2000, doing, early like multimedia work too, with like Flash and Macromedia technologies and stuff like that. And then I went on to join a little startup in Chicago that was building mobile apps for Salesforce. And that was right as the iPhone had just come out. The App Store didn't even exist, and I had never heard of Salesforce. So when I joined that company, I read about it in a newspaper, and that company was called Model Metrics. We went on to be probably the most well-known company for building mobile apps for Salesforce enterprise companies. In the ecosystem, we were bought by Salesforce in 2012. And then that started a journey within Salesforce. I was at Salesforce for another 12 years after that. Initially, kind of still leading mobile product kind of engineering for many of our largest customers at Salesforce as part of professional services. And then, Rich, when I met you, was we were working on Lightning adoption, which was
I know, right?
the biggest change Salesforce had ever made to Salesforce. You know, and
Right,
initially
right.
they were really struggling with adoption. And so we were
Yeah,
really the first team to work on product adoption at Salesforce. And rather than just assuming everyone was going to use it, we had to really focus on saying,
right.
okay, where all of the engineering team and all the product management team are working on this new thing called Lightning, and all of the customers are not using it yet. They're on Classic. Like, how do we get them to
Right.
go over this chasm for a company that had never done something like that before? It was always just use it, use what you have.
Right.
And that's where, obviously we worked together and went on to, drive that for a number of years. The first year we totally missed our targets. I remember when I first met you,
Mhm.
we had a target of like, I forget what the target was, but we were so far away. And I joined in like
Oh, yeah.
September or October or whatever, this team.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, we need to get 1 million people on Lightning. And I remember
Right.
asking like, okay, how many do we have? And it was like 23. And I was like, oh,
Yeah, yeah, it's ridiculous. And we all and you get the same question every time. "When are you gonna retire Classic?"
yeah.
"Well, we don't know yet." "Well, I'll worry about it when you tell me you're gonna retire Classic." And we're like, "Yeah." And it was funny, I was talking to somebody the other day, they're like, "Oh, I still use Classic." I was like, all our efforts 10 years later, still using Classic.
I remember we came across like at least one company that was still using like whatever the interface was called before Classic. It was like
Oh,
when I
right.
first started with Salesforce, like Classic wasn't even Classic yet. And it was that. And they were still using that. I was like, oh my God, it's still like this.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny for a company so young, it had a lot of lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
But it was
funny.
good times. And then we kind of took
Yeah,
those lessons learned in terms of like, how do you drive across the entire company program to really make change?
right,
To really help customers understand why it was worthwhile to do, this thing that they weren't planning to do, in
right.
that given year. And so we did that with MFA as well. We,
Right.
we had this big announcement that Salesforce is going to require MFA, and that we sort of, worked through customer. This was before everyone was using MFA too. It was like this was like
Right.
really, really cutting edge. Because the biggest pushback we got when we first did that announcement was like, nobody else is making us use MFA. Why are you making us
Right. Why
MFA?
are
Who
you
are
doing
you,
it? Yeah.
Salesforce, to tell me what I should do? And now everybody uses it. It's an obvious
I know.
thing. So we were cutting edge there, and then moved on to Hyperforce, moving
Right.
orgs to or cloud orgs to the cloud was an interesting journey as well.
We're already in the cloud. We got to go move you to the
Yeah.
cloud.
Moving to another.
And then after Salesforce, you went on to Altimetrics.
Yeah. Yeah. So Altimetric is a really amazing company, and we worked really closely in particular with OpenAI. And
Mhm.
so we were one of their first consulting partners, and probably the first one that was really doing implementations as well. Obviously they work with the Gartners and McKinseys of the world in terms of
Sure.
strategy consulting. Everybody does. But they brought us in because we were able to demonstrate that we were already building RAG solutions and agent solutions using AI technologies, Gen AI technologies. And we built a partnership with them where when they would sell, 10,000 ChatGPT and enterprise seats, or, API program or something like that, uh, they just announced like last week a professional services
Yeah.
team at OpenAI. But before that, if you wanted help, most companies would buy a whole bunch of seats at ChatGPT Enterprise, and then they would
Right.
turn to OpenAI and say, "Hey, how can you help me?" And they would be like, "Yeah, we don't do that." And so
Right.
they would refer us, and we'd come in and really help a company deploy. So we worked with a lot of like really big banks, wealth management firms, pharma,
Yeah.
some capital markets companies. Like, be amazed at the size and scale and even industry of a lot of companies that are really, really investing a lot in Gen AI and
Yeah.
trying to get a lot out of it. So it was a really engaging experience.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you kind of had this arc in your career where you were, developer, techie guy, and then you kind of came into the customer success world and did the whole adoption thing and professional service thing. And now I would assume with the new company, it's kind of a hybrid,
Yeah.
right? Like you're kind of leaning on your skills from the beginning of your career, but really taking what you learned around adoption, how to get people to think of beyond the technology
Yeah.
to really drive that. Is that a good assumption that this is the arc?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty decent arc, and I'm pulling on a lot of those skills that I had, all through my career in terms of,
Right.
being able to think through, okay, as we're building the initial product, I don't have any customers yet, but we need to focus in and, hire a
Right.
few engineers that will use AI tools to be able to build rapidly and get things out quickly without having to build a gigantic team. And to do that and move fast, I think is really, as a startup and as a very small company, you don't have a lot going for you, but you do have speed and you do have the ability to make a decision quickly. A big company, no matter how rapidly a big company moves, there's still a lot of people who have to be involved in decisions. And if you can just say, okay, no, we're just
Right.
going to do this, you can, shave weeks off of project plan, things like that. So really,
Yeah.
several months to kind of build the initial product and get it live and launched. And yeah, now I'm leaning more on my skills that I developed at Altimetric as a seller, and probably
Yeah.
customer success. And, I was reading this book recently. It was called, I think it's Radical Hospitality, or no, Unreasonable Hospitality. And I
Oh,
love
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
of like being not just like, it's not just about like customer service. It's about like, how do you go above and beyond what anybody even expects, like to
Right.
just, go that extra mile. And they talk a lot about like the restaurant industry in terms of like some of the top, Michelin star restaurants will not just bring you a meal, but they'll find out, well, your favorite wine is X, and make sure they have that ready. Or,
Right.
you've got an issue going on, and send somebody to your home to deal with it, like while you're having a peaceful dinner, whatever it is, things that you'd be like, nobody would do this, to
Right.
really think through that. Like, how do you make a company that is able to really blow people away and just like, so that I forget where I was going with that. But yeah, I mean, that sort of, I guess, that next step of like, how do you not just build the product, but build the company and make sure. One
Right.
of the things I learned at Salesforce was like the real importance of values and having a values based company.
Hmm.
In that, I think especially as an AI company, it was
Right.
very important to me to say like, hey, our top value is going to be the human is the most important thing. Intelligence isn't enough.
Right.
Intelligence is a commodity, and it will eventually be this, commodity. You can buy it from whatever company you want. but it's, it's the experience, it's your experience, UX is your experience that really matters. All
Right.
technologies serve people, it's the people at the end of the day that are using, and this has been true of every technological hype cycle we've ever had, right? Computers came
Right.
along and there's always fear that computers are going to take jobs and, okay, and now people just learn to use them and they get that much more out of what they're doing. And then mobile devices or
Right.
cloud or whatever comes along. And, there's a hype, but then there's also the focus on how are people actually going to use this? How are people going to get the most out of it? And to do that, you can't say this is the technology people need to adapt, and I think that's
Right.
where the AI industry right now is. And you can see it in the stats, right? Like if Anthropic has this really great article from a few months ago where of engineering use cases of engineering roles, it's like 50% of engineers are using AI technology and the things that they're building and getting success out of it.
Sure.
And nobody's arguing with the fact that it's really making a difference in terms of what is possible in the world today. Like there's no value questions, right?
Sure.
And then you look at more of a sales use case and you say like, okay, it's actually like 5% of sellers are effectively getting value out of AI technologies on a day-to-day basis. In reality, when I
Right.
talk to sellers today, which I'm doing a lot just based on what I'm doing right now, is that people are using 8 to 10 tools. They're stitching them all together. They're getting their leads here.
Yep.
They're feeding them into this system. Like they are working for the AI. Like, and each one of these tools has an AI. No, and it's like, okay, so now I'm just the one
Right.
who moved the thing from the place to place, and it's just like this swivel chair
Well,
problem again, again, and again.
yeah, there was this, I think, a couple of years ago, uh, there's these two schools of thought that we always talk with people about. Is the one school of thought is turn it on and let people go. And the other school is guide them through this journey. Right. And to that point, the client we were both at, we were talking to marketing and they're like, okay, so I upload this PDF and then I run this prompt, then I download it and then I upload it over here. And just like a head in our hands, we're like, what are you talking about? Like, why
Yeah,
aren't you hooked into the data source?
yeah,
I don't know how to do that. And it's the realization that like this is connecting companies at a deeper level than any technology has in the
yeah.
history of technology. And it's this weird intersection. So I'd love your take on this of, the traditional bifurcation of, well, IT has to set up the software and go through security and get you guys all permissions and usually the admins, and sometimes that's decentralized. But let's take that use case as the majority of companies use IT. And then you come along with this technology that you can put into literally anyone's hands with little to no setup and they can start using it. Right. And so now you have these people who are running off doing things, but are they really, to your point in this article's point, really more effective? Really getting the impact of it? So, what's your kind of take on the way people are approaching this?
I think a lot of companies are really trying to move fast because they're getting pressure from their C-level, from their boards, and they're trying to move as quickly as they can. And we saw this even in some regulated industries where they had rolled out an AI tool and then started to think about governance. I know governance is a favorite topic of
Right.
yours, but you would think at like a regulated company, the first thing they would think about was governance. But
Right.
a lot of companies are trying to move so fast that they roll it out and then they're like, okay, how do we govern this? And I think that, the thing that you really need to think about is like, how do you adapt for technology that moves at the speed of AI? And you can't
Right.
govern it with the old way of doing things, which was, boards that meet once a month, and to make decisions and then roll out software over the course of a year because people are going to use it. And this was one of the things that,
Right.
all AI companies do this because when they try to sell an enterprise license to a company, one of the first things they do is like pull up all of the individuals that are using their email address for this product already and paying for it across the company. And
Right.
so whether you like it or not, people are using these technologies and that's bad, right? But you want to come up
Right.
with governance models where people can do it in a safe manner and people can experiment and innovate
Right.
because that's what really is, I mean, if you really think about where does innovation live in a company? It's honestly wherever it pops up. It could be within
Right.
IT. People are people, whether they work for IT or they work for a business group or whatever. You've got somebody who has a great idea. And if you can capture that great idea and really, help it to flourish, but you have to do it in a
Right.
way that like, that you don't have 12 different people building the exact same thing, right? You want to make sure that you know
Right.
what it is quickly, but before it spreads, make sure you're, helping to govern it and do it in a scalable model. Otherwise, you end up with situations where it's in the news, right? Like, oh, somebody accidentally deleted all of their email or formatted their
Right.
entire laptop with OpenClaw, or, I mean, it's like, that's bad.
Right. Well, and I've talked about this long. We've talked to a number of CIOs, and I think the role of IT is obviously changing, and the democratization of data, or sorry, of technology through AI is obviously changing that as well. But we also talk about the fact that a lot of people don't understand one of the core tenets of the CIO role or the IT role is protection of
Yeah.
the company from
Yeah.
data leakage, from security, from, outside threats. And I think sometimes people forget that these aren't a bunch of like coders just in the back room creating your CRM or, your HR system. They're actually looking at things like, well, where could data leak? Where could we be vulnerable to threats from a security perspective? And so AI brings up a lot of that, right? I mean, prior, when you'd implement something like Salesforce, you had security protocols around it, right? Like nobody could get into it if you didn't log into it for the
Yeah.
most part. And admin access was one of those things that was locked down, right? Like you didn't just give admin access to anybody. And now with these AI tools, somebody can just download the AI tool and start throwing all the company data in there, and nobody knows where that data is going, right?
Yeah.
And what's happening to it. So, in your experience, do you think that companies are actually understanding the different roles that are actually needed in this new AI world? Or do you think they're trying to adapt AI to the old way of working and that's what's breaking us a little bit?
I think it's interesting because I think it's a really interesting question, but because I think everybody's figuring it out. But I
Right.
also think like you see it in like the fear or like the hype around the death of software or the death of
Right.
SaaS or whatever, where it's like people are of the opinion that now that I have, Lovable or Replit or whatever, people just build it themselves. Like, hey, why pay for
Right.
Salesforce? I can just build my own CRM. And
Right.
what they forget is exactly what you're saying. Like a lot of what you're paying that software company for is, I think it's also like you could run something locally as well. But like what you're paying
Right.
that software company for is one enterprise grade, like just like say physical security of the data center, like you could
Right.
run it on a laptop in a closet, but it's not the safest way to do it. So you've got a, an actual like hyperscaler data center that has the security then of like software and making sure updates are patched. Like everybody loves building new things and it's exciting. You're
Right.
like, look at my thing. Nobody loves 3 years of maintaining that thing, right? Like it.
No.
And so I think that's the thing that IT has to be responsible for is ensuring that, okay, somebody had an awesome idea and built this tool and they're using it themselves. And that means one thing, right? That was one thing that we really talked a lot about with like AI governance was a lot of times somebody will build a tool and they're using it themselves. And like that's an interesting
Hmm.
category of thing. And as long as they're not doing something that like, and that's where I think like you want to have principles and like rules that people understand and they know what's safe and like reasonable to do and they're not going outside the bounds of that. And then there's this like second category of like, okay, it's starting to spread. This person built something so
Right.
exciting that now there's 20 people using it. And that means that you don't only have to worry about the systemic security of like, is it going to leak data? But also, is it giving you the answers that you want it to give? Or do you have a small group of people
Right.
in the company that are like off in their own world going off like they have an entirely new business model that doesn't align with the company,
Right.
because that's what the AI says to do, and it's like,
Right. Right.
you know,
Right. I just wrote this thing and I was saying exactly that is that there's, when you throw a whole bunch of summaries into an AI, you get a watered down version.
yeah,
It rounds the edges a little bit. And there's this judgment that I feel like some people have given up to the AI, right?
yeah,
They're like, "Oh, the AI came back with XYZ." And I was like, "Oh, okay, but what do you think about that?" Like
yeah,
like, we're not paying the AI, we're paying you. Again, kinda how you started this conversation, this is a tool, guys, like any
yeah,
other tool, super powerful tool, Super cool tool. So when we think about tools, and you kind of touched upon this when you started talking about, founding the company as AI native, and you think of the behemoths of like Oracle, Salesforce, ServiceNow, like they're built on these platforms that aren't AI native, and now they have to become AI. What do you think the benefit of, as you think of your company and selling it and moving into the market, is the benefit of being AI native versus the challenge Salesforce and these other companies have with it was something before it was classic, before it was Lightning, now it's headless
Yeah.
360, and now it's, and there's a lot of baggage there, right? A lot of customizations people have made to the application over the years that either they have to unwind or, just ignore. So what do you think the benefit of for your company being AI native?
I think what we have is the flexibility to build a system that lives where people like want to live. And so that's why the first thing that we launched was not just the web interface, but the MCP. And to make
Hmm.
sure that then, as we also have like the ChatGPT Enterprise App Store app launching pretty soon as well, which is an
Yeah.
extension of an MCP that also has some like visual elements to it. And so I think if you think about like where do people want to live and get the most value out of like bringing tools together and things like that, we have a lot of flexibility as a startup that can kind of think about whatever we want to do, but we're also building a Salesforce app, right? And so
Hmm.
I think that where I've seen a lot of companies struggle, regardless of what tool they're using, if they're using Salesforce or any other tool, like I think companies do really well with opportunity management in Salesforce and with products and price books and all that.
Hmm.
And I think leads a lot of times just kind of come in and sit and don't really get that. Like, if you want to really follow up with leads, you have to be like hyper vigilant about it. And most
Right.
people, myself included, are not hyper vigilant about much. But if you can create a system that acts on your behalf with your guidance and that kind of a thing, then I think that's a
Right.
real benefit. And then as you have a lead that's developed into an opportunity, integrate that with a Salesforce. So,
Right.
it would be stupid to go, head to head with the Salesforces of the world. But I do think,
You don't want to be the next Benioff? Come on. When you're a billionaire, just remember us all. And that's interesting because if you think of the landscape, like let's talk, 10 years ago, Marketo, Eloqua, like these lead engines, right? That again hooked into Salesforce, and there's always that. And then of course Salesforce had Marketing Cloud, which was who did they buy? On Demand or Demandware?
Demandware,
What was
yeah,
the yeah?
Demandware was
And so
the platform, yeah.
right, right. And so one of the things we've talked about a lot with people is this notion of the 360 degree of the customer, right? And
Yeah.
so I mean, this was always the pitch Benioff had. Oh, you're gonna get 360, and um, whether it was Tableau or whatever. But it never really came to fruition. Let's be honest, right? Like it was a whole bunch of dashboards. People had to know their metrics, but nobody was really driving their business out of Tableau or Salesforce reporting for that matter. How do you feel that AI, because I think this is AI changes that entire conversation and kind of specifically within your space?
Yeah, I think it changes the conversation because I think that it allows for a degree of understanding about, at least in my space, a degree of understanding about a lead and about a company and about what they're doing. One of the things that we have built into UX.AI is a lead research tool that has an agent that goes out and finds information about a lead without a rep having to do it. If you think about
Right.
when I've generally had a sales call in a B2B enterprise space, you have a name, you have an email address, you have a LinkedIn, you probably spend 15, 20 minutes at least, like kind of researching the person before the
Right.
call. So you know what to talk about. You see, oh, they went to the school I did, they live near me, they have the same sports teams in common, like anything to talk about, right? And so a lot of that is, if you didn't have to do all that and you had an agent that just goes off and does it for you, that helps to develop that kind of, it's not developing, everything about the customer, but it's helping you understand the person that you're about to talk to.
Right.
And so, it, the tool does a 4-step process. The first is to make sure the lead isn't complete junk, which is a quick step.
Right.
The second step is to research that person as they relate to their employer. So if it's Mark Benioff, you really want to
Right.
know this person's the CEO. They probably could
Right.
buy anything, like And so this is like, you need to drop everything to talk to this lead, if they're interested in talking to you. But realistically speaking, there's a lot of kind of gray area in there where it's like, okay,
Right.
does this person appear on their website, and in what respect? Like, are they on the board of directors? Are they on the executive
Right.
team? Are they a marketer that blogs on that? Like, how are they influential at this company? Because especially
Right.
now, everybody has this, like, not everybody, most people that are in leadership positions have some sort of public presence on the internet,
Hmm.
either on their website, or then the next step is it does a broader search across the internet to look for information about you. And it finds a lot of really interesting stuff. Talking to, a woman this morning who has a company that she was like, did you find this? Did you find that? I was like, yeah, it says right here. She's like, oh, interesting. Because that's not like actually public on the, it was
Yeah.
information she had out there, but it wasn't like linked from her website.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, getting stuff like that, and then it generates a report for you to be able to, one, as a human, just read it and have a better idea within that,
Right.
like, 1 minute before you hop on the call. But then two,
Right.
as you generate an email, it'll take intent signals, your notes from the last few meetings you had, all of that research and what you want to talk about, and generate that email for you without having to go in
Right.
and, pull all that information together.
So I know you're going to show us a little bit about the product and how it works. Why why were you passionate about creating it in lead? Like, why did you start with leads? Because I'm sure you have ideas to expand,
Yeah.
maybe. But what was significant about this area of the business that you thought was? Did you feel like it was underserved? Did you feel like it was ripe for a tool like yours to come in and capitalize on? Like, what drew you to specifically this area
Yeah, it's a
of,
couple things.
I guess, the go to
One,
market?
yeah, it's an area that I think has not a lot of focus
Okay.
right now. And I think what you see is a lot of companies focusing on generating new leads. And
Yep.
that is, I think, a relatively solved problem. If you want 1,000 leads that match some degree of, description that you can email or you can reach out to, that's pretty easy to get from a variety of different sites right now.
Right.
You got to pay for it, but you can get email
Sure.
lists pretty easily. I think what I've generally seen though is most companies have a lot of leads, more than they know what to do with. If you go to a conference and you have a booth at a conference, they give you a badge scanner. You scan every badge and people that stop by.
Right.
And then you finish the conference and everybody's all excited and you go out for a dinner. And then Monday comes and you're like, okay, we have 1,000 leads. We're going to sign them out. Everybody's going to take some. And then like the next week goes by and you have another meeting. You're like, okay, how many? Like, and it's like this constant challenge of, we have a lot of leads and we needed to follow up, like, honestly, probably on Friday, to be able to say,
Right.
the first email goes out like during the conference. Hey, we're still here. Would you like to get together for a drink or something? Anything to be able
Right.
to kind of build that relationship rather than waiting till the next week. And I've seen it like time and time again where it's not, people talk about like SDR teams or whatever. Frequently, it's like your most expensive people that are being brought in to shepherd the like follow up of a conference like that, where you have a whole bunch of leads, because it's not really anybody's job. The list isn't quite ready to ship off to an SDR team.
Right.
There's a lot of kind of, everybody kind of has to go in and type up their notes or whatever about what it was that they didn't get in during the conference. So I see a lot of that where companies have leads coming from all over the place and they're just dying on the vine, where they're not following up rapidly enough to really make something out of them. And so I think like
Right.
cold outreach of, a whole bunch of cold leads is one thing that, you could do. But I think making better use of the ones that you have, I think is just, an area that I saw a real benefit in focusing on. I also just think it's a growing market and an underserved market of building
Uh-huh.
tools for sellers. Because I think if you look at the majority of the AI tools today are still kind of built by engineers for engineers, or at least that sort of mindset of where it's like, okay, I have a slash command. And it's like, for me, yeah, I'm fine with that. Or, I have to install something on my laptop and run it. And, I've got a terminal open so this can run in the background. Like, whatever, I'm fine. But for the most part, you've got 5% of the cutting edge of sellers that are like right there with it. Right. And they're like, yeah, this is
Right.
exciting. This is what I'm doing. And you see, like, a lot of people are like building out their own systems to do this with OpenClaw or Claude Cowork and things. And it's awesome. But I think it's also, if you look at the statistics of what percentage of people are really getting that value out of it, it's very, very low.
Right.
And I think that's a usability problem. I don't think it's a technology problem. I think technology is great, but it's not built for the persona of, if you want a seller sitting there installing tools and copying spreadsheets around and learning about what the difference between predictive and generative AI are, cool. But I
Right.
bet you want your sellers out talking to people and building relationships. And,
But I mean,
that's,
that's always been the argument, right? Uh, we talk a lot about data with AI. I quote this one CIO all the time, and she's like, IT doesn't create the data, guys. Your salespeople create the data. Your
yeah,
marketing people create the data. So if the data is wrong, it's because it's wrong. And then there was this meme that said, swim with most salespeople would rather swim with sharks than enter data into their CRM or something crazy like that, right? Like it's because they don't do it because it's hard. And
yeah,
so now, to your point, you're talking about now I got to learn AI and then I got to apply AI. And if I don't learn it, is my job going to go away? Am I going to become obsolete?
yeah,
Right. Or are you going to have the AI do it for me? And this kind of goes back to the earlier conversation around, um, it, this idea that people are not really getting the benefit of it because they're not their job isn't designed to work with technology that way. And I think as much as people say, oh, it's you just enter it like a human would enter it and it's going to give it to you, not really. Like we all experience that. I was working with a spreadsheet the other day in Claude Code and I was like, I need you to do this, and it wouldn't do it. And I was
yeah,
like, finally, I just put it in Excel and did the old formula because it was quicker than trying to explain to Claude Code what I wanted because I'm not a great prompter yet, right? Like, still learning.
yeah.
So I think it's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about UX. So you founded the company and now it's launched, right?
Yes,
You're officially launched.
we're officially
Um, uh,
launched.
so so why don't we take people through it? Like
Yeah.
let's take a look at the thing. I'd love for you to explain the philosophy behind how you laid the application out, the usability of it, how people can really experience um the application itself, and
Yeah.
kind of what makes it different that people are like, oh, that's the problem you've solved for me.
Yeah, I think, and thanks so much for asking. And I'm going to make this real quick because I don't want the whole thing to be a demo. But I think a couple things that make it different. This is just UX.AI. Putting a chat widget like this on your website takes 5 minutes. And if you go to my YouTube video, YouTube channel, I have a video of me actually getting it done in like 4 minutes and 50 seconds, which is it'll ingest your
Yeah,
entire
I did it
website.
myself. It was super simple. And
Yeah.
again, I'm not a technical person. It took me like 2 minutes to put it on our site. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
That's awesome. And that's the goal, to not make you have to understand how to write an agent, but just to say, hey, a couple clicks and say, oh, I have an agent. We also have an agent for your agent. So you can just ask the agent to create an agent and it will. And you can just deploy that on your website. As it does that, though, it'll also ask you questions. So as you interact with the agent and you ask questions about like, oh, how could I work with, Rich Nazzaro's company? It will tell you that information, but then it will say, we'd be happy to set up some time with Rich. What's your name and email? And we'll set up an invite to meet. So that then gathers that name and email for a couple, you can set up an offer, a coupon code, a meeting invite, a gated content of a PDF that's interesting, or like there's a variety of different ways you could do it. And to really, to get someone to want to share at least name and email. That name and email
Right.
then is captured automatically in the system. And you can see the lead here. I'm just showing myself to make it easy, but a lead captured, Tom Gersic. You can have my email address. You can have the company that I work for. It'll find the LinkedIn profile automatically. It will save all of the information from the chat conversation so you can go back to it. Plus, it'll tell you what web pages were visited while you were there so you can get all that information as well. And then this is what I said,
It's
where I think the
amazing.
research report is really, really valuable in that if you are about to have a conversation with, a prospect, rather than going out to LinkedIn and then searching for a bunch of things, you have a formatted and structured research report right here that tells you information about what I do, and this was all generated automatically without me clicking a button. And, just
Right.
the lead is there. By the time I got to it, the research report was already written. And so that is, if I think about how do you create a system that is automated and isn't making the rep do more work, but is giving them more value. And if you think about, like you were
Right.
saying, one of the pushbacks that we always got with CRM was people didn't see the value of entering their data. They entered the data so their boss
Right.
could see it, or they entered their data at the end of the month. One of the things we always saw with like Lightning adoption was like, oh, sales teams tend to log in on the 30th day of the month to enter the opportunities because that's when they get paid. And
Right.
so, but if you can say like, okay, if you were to just enter the name and email, and by the way, you can do it from ChatGPT or Claude or wherever you want without having to log into anything else, and it'll create a research report for you and generate an email without you having to, I want it to be friendly, I want it to be short, and I want it to be balanced on personalization. I can generate an email
Uh-huh.
and send that email in a matter of seconds. And by the way, I can do it not just for one person, but I can do it 100 people, 1,000 people. It'll do it individual personalized emails. It'll find things like, oh, you're recently promoted. It'll say, you have a new job somewhere. You have whatever it is that it
Right.
manages to find it on the internet, and use that information to make it more engaging and more personal for the people.
When you think about this workflow, because I mean, it is really amazing to think when somebody goes to our website and they just say, "Hey, yeah, it's Rich Nazzaro from SaaS BA," that in 2 minutes you could pick up the phone and call me and say, "Hey, great talking to you. Oh, I see you went to Suffolk University. My kid went there or whatever." To your point, you would have had to think about that, had to go research it, make the connection, figure
Right.
out the talk track, right? And if I think that the point you're making throughout this is by the time you do all that, if you prioritize it, then you've already the lead's maybe lukewarm at that point, or maybe it's gone cold, right? Because you didn't do it in 24 hours, you did it in 48 hours or 72 hours or a week. And en masse, it was even more daunting.
Yeah. These are the tendencies and the things that our best sellers do, right? Like, after you've been a career seller for 20 years and you have a new contact you're going to work with, to go out and research them and to find common points of conversation for them and that. What about the new hire, the recent grad, the intern?
Right.
They will get there eventually, but how do you make it that much easier for them to not have to think, oh, yeah, I should have researched that person. Oh, yeah, I should have had that information. Just, hey, I have it right here at my
But
fingertips.
that's a really interesting point, though, when you think about it, because we talk a lot about the human in the loop. We talk about the fear that comes with AI. All jobs are going to go away, and we're going to be working for Skynet eventually. So when you think about your mission and what you built here, and you think about a really seasoned person who's been selling 30 years, and then you think about, obviously it's May, we have a recent crop of college graduates who are
Yep.
just now have to enter the workforce. What do you think the balance is with a tool like yours to the experienced seller and to the person just entering the market? Like,
I
how
think
do you like think that works for them?
my goal is it works for both because
Right.
I want it to be something that a seller will use and think to themselves, oh, wow. And like some of the best conversations I've had with some of the prospects I've talked with for this app, I've shown them, especially the research report, and you hear like, wow. And
Right.
because the seasoned seller knows how much effort goes into that research when they do it. And the new seller didn't know to do it in the first place or, or isn't
Right.
good at it, you know? Um, or they do it, but they're still getting the hang of like where to look and how to get good information and what to believe and what not to believe and
Right.
those types of things. So I think that's my goal is to really create something that works for sellers and as a
Right.
based around the experience of what it's like to be a seller and whatever technology whatever industry you're selling into, but it's a common because it's a human to human interaction, right? Like, and that's where
Right.
we talk about, oh, it's going to replace people. I don't think so because like the ultimate sale is made by relationships, is made by, those types of things. And so I think the more you can help someone to spend more time on developing those relationships and more time on, the communication is where I think there's a value.
Yeah, I think there's this idea in some people's minds that like buying anything in the future is going to be like Amazon, right? And we've talked with many people about this is yeah, I'm not going to make $1 million decision by entering it in my cart and hitting, send.
No.
Like that's not going to happen. And a lot of it is about the things that have always plagued software implementations, which is the process and the people piece. And I think that a lot of people are now coming to the realization that, or at least should be, I think that I think when you take on AI and you think about your process, you're almost taking out chunks of processes and inserting AI to make it more efficient, to be able to do things like your tool does, which is give them a research report and put them and set them in the right direction, right? And cut out that inefficiency and that time that they spend on repetitive tasks. But I don't think people are really looking at that process and saying, oh, I don't, if there were 10 steps, I don't need these 6 steps anymore. So now what does that job look like? We had Rena on the podcast and we talked a lot about jobs to be done,
Yeah.
right? What are the jobs to be done? And she's like, when you put it in the 4 box, the things up top of the right, those are what needs to be done. The things down on the bottom left, you don't need them. You never needed them. You
Yeah.
thought you needed them. And so I think when you think about your tool and you think about those new sellers, some people will argue, well, they don't have the baggage. They don't have the baggage of, well, I had to go print the report and bring it over to Sally and she had to stamp the report and then I had to have a triplicate form. But then they put it into Salesforce. But then I had to enter the information in Salesforce and that was a real pain in the ass. And so for newer people, I think some people feel like, well, this is really scary. And for younger people, they're like, why would you work any other way?
Yeah.
Like, this is silly. And does that mentally take people think, oh, well, that's just going to make people lazy, right? Because the computer's doing all the work for them. But if we're really smart about it, it's really about focusing on the right jobs to be done, which was arguably what we've always said technology was supposed to do. And it kind of never really got there because we were always customizing the technology to whatever that job to be done was. And then I think you kind of called it out earlier. And then it served that purpose for that time. And then that purpose changed. And you're like, now I have this technical debt and I got to change the technology. And that's 6 months. And by the time you change the technology, the purpose has changed again. Whereas with AI, somebody said the other day, and I wonder what your take is on it. Somebody said the other day is you should be vibe coding every week. Like you should ship things with bugs and just change it every week. Just update it every week. Just keep on pushing changes.
Yeah. I think the
Do you
benefit of
believe?
that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think, I think the benefit of pushing changes, even if there are bugs, is you get feedback fast. And I think that's the most
Right.
important thing. You don't want the bug to be a security bug. You don't want the bug to be
Sure.
something, there's a caveat, but there is a value, I think, in pushing out something, even if it's not 100% perfect. Because,
Mhm.
one of the things that I think I saw as we started working very closely with OpenAI was that they would roll out something for the partner organization because they were kind of building the partner,
Yeah.
both their partner team and like the technology, the partner, like partner portal or whatever. But they would roll something out, get feedback, and be totally willing to trash it all and redo it. And it's like
Mm.
that is something that in the past you would give feedback and be like, okay, thank you, we'll write it down, and we'll take this. But like a lot of the feedback didn't really land because the amount of effort that goes into changing something, even 5 years ago, even a
Right.
year ago, was such a high bar that like you could take some feedback, but you couldn't take most of it. But
Right.
if you are using a vibe coding tool, you can like totally trash an entire idea and like reinvent it, especially early on in the project to really match what people are asking for. I think that there is a lot of power in that.
Do you think, like, we'll pick on your tool specifically, do you think it will get to a point where it will be counterproductive? Like in Salesforce, we had idea exchange, right? And there were thousands or millions of ideas, to your point. got voted on and it got a really high vote and never did anything with it because they're like, yeah, at the end of the day, there's no ROI in this, guys. It would cost us more to build this than it would be to benefit who all these people who think it's a great idea. Do you think AI code will get like that, or do you think it's just going to be so advanced that it's you're just going to be able to rewrite it overnight and it doesn't matter?
I think there's always going to be technical debt. One of my favorite, true to the core, it was like 2 years ago. I was at in person at True to the Core at Dreamforce. Somebody had a shirt with all of the different admin interfaces like listed on it. And they got up to ask the question, and it was Parker Harris who looked at the guy's shirt and was like, "Hey, sure, could you tell me what's on it?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's every disconnected admin interface across all of Salesforce's products." And he's like, "Oh, interesting." And it
Yeah.
was
Thanks.
like which was exactly the problem, is that it was the problem that Salesforce had, was that there's no revenue in admin interfaces, right? Like
Right.
nobody buys an admin interface. Like it's just a thing that you have to have, but if it's disconnected, it's disconnected. So I think that there's always going to be that, like, you have to focus somewhere, and the vibe coding tools help you move faster. But like, is there ever going to be a time where it solves all problems? Probably not.
Yeah.
It just helps people move faster in the directions they want to move.
So I know it's early days and people always ask ROI. So what are your predictions on the type of ROI that you think can be achieved through leveraging your platform?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. I think that where the ROI will come from is basically that engagement with the leads that you have that you're not engaging with effectively
Hmm.
today. So building, revenue out of an area that is just underserved. And
Right.
so, at least that's the theory. We're still kind of growing customer base, and we'll build some data
Sure.
around that. But I think that there's a lot of focus on bringing in new leads. But once you have them, making sure that you're doing as much as you possibly can to generate that business and to gain,
Right.
people's trust by doing it and making it as personal as possible. So the revenue, the ROI, I think, is in keeping it rapid to deploy. I think where we have value as a small company is, hey, we can roll things out fast. We can build
Yeah.
tools that can be rolled out fast. A lot of the bigger players want you to bring in consultants and forward deployed engineers and all of these, and you're like,
Yeah.
it's expensive. People spend 6 times as much money on the services that go along with technology as they do on the
Yeah.
technology itself.
Right.
And so I think there's a real opportunity to say, this is a technology that you can roll out. And that's why, our pitch is, hey, you can have a web agent on your website in 5 minutes. This is not,
Which we did.
yeah, it's not a 12-week project to do it.
Right.
We want it to be as quick as possible. It's also, how do you do the integration for email? And we make it as easy as logging in with your Google account and sending an email.
Right.
It's not a dramatic, walking through all of your,
Well,
back end.
I think your point is well founded that like I mean, it's kind of like anything in life. If what do you have to do something 10,000 hours before you become an expert or something? So if you don't make 10,000 calls, you're not going to get any sales, right?
Yeah.
So if there are leads sitting there idle, well, you're certainly not getting the revenue.
Yeah.
Like, so you can guarantee you're not getting that revenue. But what happens when you put a tool in place that allows you to mine for that revenue quicker? Then you got to say is if I picked up the phone 2 days earlier, what would be my likelihood of closing that deal than 2 days later? Or
Totally. I mean, especially a web lead, right? Like a web lead is
right.
somebody who was looking for something. They found your website. They found what they
Yeah.
were interested enough to follow up on. 2 days later, they've already found a different website with like you have everybody has competition, like they're
Right.
not interested in you anymore because somebody else followed up. And so
Oh, I
that's,
mean, think of like a real estate agent. Real estate agents, like to your point, I think it's like an hour because they're
yeah,
just going on websites and, oh, I saw this house and I had to sign up. I signed up and you call them. They're like, oh, no, I already got an agent. You like, I just called you 5 minutes ago. As you think about the vision of the product for the next couple of years, what are you thinking? I guess first question, the product itself, but then how would you extend to potentially different partnerships?
yeah, a big part of what we're thinking about right now is how do we make it easy for leads to come into the system, so that we can, go through the research and the scoring and the routing of all of those leads, but not make it difficult to get those leads. So our initial partnerships will be live with OpenAI on their apps. So that's an MCP kind of integration. Salesforce is kind of next. We're working on that. And then Zapier as well. We'll have a
That
Zapier
makes
Zap.
sense. Yeah.
So you can integrate from anything and to anything, with that. Beyond that, we're working really closely with Google in terms of like the ability to log in and send emails and use that as a way also to then eventually respond to emails.
Hmm.
And, probably HubSpot as well as is kind of the next
Right.
obvious place we want to integrate. I think anywhere where, sellers are kind of spending their day is an area that we want to integrate. And then, what we said earlier was basically that we're not focusing really on lead creation or lead, like generating 1,000 leads
Right.
based off of an ICP because there's other, products that do that really well. But we do have a existing partnership with a vendor that allows us to do that. So we'll probably be integrating that as well, where you can, most of this is from customer feedback. Like as I've talked to prospects and the customers, one thing that I hear a lot is that, need for one system where you could just chat and say, hey, I want, this is what I'm looking for. These are the companies I look at. This is the type of person I want to reach out to, and to be able to generate that list and create the leads and then have it research them, kind of go through the same process. So we'll have that
Right. So,
coming
because
up
we talked
eventually.
earlier, like about the fact that you can do this through the website, but I mean, I could upload any lead file into the app, right? I don't have, it's not limited to what we demonstrated earlier, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So any spreadsheet, any XLSX file, Microsoft spreadsheet, or any CSV in any format, that's one
Yeah.
area. That's one thing that AI is really good at is like being adaptive to formats. So I really didn't want this to be a system where you had to like work with our template or whatever or anything like that. Just like give us a spreadsheet, it'll take it, it'll import the leads from it. You can map it. And we have, I think, what is a really innovative system for custom fields as well. So if you have a spreadsheet with, let's say, 100 columns and it's, name and email, but it's also your Apollo ID
Right.
or like all sorts of other information, you don't need to be an administrator to create those fields. It will dynamically generate fields on the object. As those fields get more and more used, an administrator can promote them to be a regular standard field, or they could just leave it as is. So custom fields for us is this like very, very dynamic thing because we thought like, okay, leads are something that's inherently kind of unstructured. You have a name, you have an email, you have other data, you have like whatever it is. Like, let's just make that as easy as possible to structure as much as you can and, not make it be real rigid based on, a administrator having to go in and set up the object mapping and all that. We'll just take it, create custom fields on the fly and allow you to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, okay, so as we think about wrapping up, we have a couple of like, rapid fire questions. So, what do you
Yeah.
think the most overhyped aspect of AI is right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the most overhyped aspects is the like locally installed stuff. And I think that's because like, you could install OpenClaw or, or even like people talk about it as if it were a security feature that you could run it locally on your laptop. And I think, you coming from Salesforce, you know very well that like enterprises are very comfortable with the cloud and
Right.
actually not that comfortable with people running stuff on their laptop. So I think that a lot of the conversation right now where you hear about, local LLMs and local small language models and local agent infrastructure and all of that, people talk about it as if it's a benefit, but it's actually a security risk. It's actually a compliance risk. It's actually, all of these problems. And so I think that's overhyped. I think we're going to see more and more companies be perfectly fine using the cloud, and we're already seeing it. So, OpenAI or hyperscaler or whatever that,
Right.
solution of choice is.
What do you think the most underhyped part of AI is right now?
Yeah, maintenance. Yeah. I think that's the thing that I really think that there's so much excitement around, oh, I could just build whatever I want.
Right.
And it's true. You build so much more than you could a year ago. And it's amazing. And yet, having been a consultant and developed software for companies that don't know how to maintain software, like, first off, you have to make sure you have the right people to do it. But even if you have the people that are like excited about maintaining software, eventually like finance is going to be like, how much are we spending on like maintaining software? And we're a CPG company. At some point, it kind of doesn't always work out where So I think that's a underhyped is that even if you are developing and rolling out software, you have to have a organization that's built around maintaining and high quality and that sort of thing. So I don't think SaaS is dead. I don't think software is dead. I don't think we're all going to be building our own software anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that because I was waiting for like a cool like feature, and you're like, no, the maintenance. And it's like the most unsexy thing about AI, but
Totally.
it's the truth, right? So I think that's so funny. What book or resource would you recommend that you've read, or something you've podcast you listen to, or something that you think people would benefit from learning about AI?
I would listen to the Business Uncomplicated podcast.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's goes without saying.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to read a lot. It's a really good question. I think some of the really good resources are coming from Anthropic right now is publishing a lot of good data. They have a lot of good data on like how people are using AI in the real world, and it doesn't always align to what's in the news.
Mm,
And I think also OpenAI has published a lot of good reports on also like how it's affecting the job market. They posted that not too long ago. And I think again, it's not quite what's in the news. If you look at roles that are most impacted by AI, in many cases, it's actually causing growth. Engineers who are capable of building quickly with AI and getting great results out of it is a massive growth opportunity right now. Like people are, those are areas where people are being hired. And I think we'll see that across the ecosystem. As you have people that know how to use it, those are areas that will be job growth and not risk to the job losses. So I think those two sources are actually really great for getting information about how people use AI and where the successes are and where the risks are. In terms of like just business strategy, like I'm reading this really great book by Malcolm Gladwell, David and Goliath, right now, which is
mm,
basically just like as a like fake surprise, right? Like as a small company, how can you win? Or
right.
as the little guy, how do you win? So that's a really good resource.
What do you hope your company looks like in 2 years?
What I really want this company to be is just a great resource for how sellers are using AI.
Mhm.
And how sellers are really getting value out of the work that they're doing. I want the company to really, when people log in and use it, be like, oh wow, this is awesome. And so that's the real goal is to have that kind of magic moment of as you're using it to be like, wow. And that's the thing that I really want to capture is just that sort of excitement around the product. And ultimately, we're trying to grow our customer base and do that too. So in 2 years, I'm hopeful this is a, wildly successful endeavor. And I'm sure it will be.
As do we. Where can people find you if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, you can go right to UX.AI and it's YOUEX.ai. There's a contact form right there. If you fill out, honestly, if you interact with any of the agents that are on that website, it will get to me and I will be in touch. So I am not difficult to reach whatsoever. And that's the best way to get in touch with me. You can find me
You're
on
not
LinkedIn as
you're not
well.
Elon Musk status yet,
No,
shrouded with people. Okay. So you're still
not just
approachable.
yet. Absolutely. Easy to contact.
Yeah. And we'll give the folks a teaser that probably in a month or so we'll be doing a webinar. So people should be on the
Yeah.
lookout for
Excited about
us
that one.
us collaborating more in the future.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm super
cool.
excited about that one too.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. It's been good catching up.
All right. Bye.
All right. All right. See you.